Welcome to the Village Boy podcast. This is your host, Trez. This is another topic that is just crazy. Aid to Africa. Most African countries have had independence from their colonial masters for at least 60 years. If you look at the life expectancy of Africans, the life expectancy of Africans between 60 and 55. The life expectancy for Western counterparts is up there between 80 and 75. African countries are some of the oldest countries on earth, but they've been plagued with all kinds of geopolitical football. The white man has done its fair share of craziness across Africa. There was slavery, colonization, all kinds of stuff went on with this continent. But our focus today is aid to Africa. In the grand scheme of things, after the Second World War, America decided to provide aid to the Europeans. Europe was decimated, Europe was struggling, Europe was poor, Europe was a deserted, poor, confused continent after the Second World War. Coming out of the Second World War, America's economy was coming of age, it was booming, industrialization was going on. And America decided to look at their European brothers and say, we would leverage our economy against yours. You would use our economy to build your countries. They came up with something called the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan, this is what Trump is actually breaking up today. Trump is actually putting away the Marshall Plan because some of these trade deals and treaties and agreements that were signed that are affecting that have held America hostage were signed when some of these European countries were coming of age, and that made sense. They were poor. America was rich. America used its rich status to offer a platform that they could latch on and then grow their economy. But see, post colonization, no European country or Western country, America included, decided to do a Marshall Plan for Africa. Nobody did that. Nobody looked at Africa and said, oh, you're coming off colonization. Let's leverage our economies so you could sell your products. You could make products and sell your products over here. I mean, if you think about it, if America never did anything to Liberia, a country that became the refugee camp for slaves they had shipped over, America went on to prioritize other things, other countries, but never focused on Liberia. And we could do a show on that some other time. Like I said, no other country did to Africa what America did to the Europeans. And I've always argued that Africa does need a Marshall Plan because Africa needs to be productive. If the argument is that Africa should intersell within each other, then the argument would have been safe for Europe. European countries could have just organized within themselves, but they needed an outside player to be able to tell us that make things and sell, and we're going to buy, and it's going to boost your economy. See, but they didn't do that for Africa. What they did for Africa was offer Africa aid. They gave Africa the aid drug. They gave Africa the aid drug, and Africa got addicted to this drug. And for years and for years and for years and for years, Africa has been milking this drug and it's addicted to this drug. And one day in 2025, one man, Donald Trump, wins an election and says, no more. I'm cutting this cold turkey. But there are no structures in place. Africans are not ready because it's a drug, it's a fix. You're getting this drug, steady supply. Never care where it came from, never understood, never worried to understand the processes that in place. to make this drug a reality for you, you just you just got comfortable. And one of the seven deadliest sins on earth should be comfortable. Being comfortable. That should be the top most deadliest sins. Not pride, being comfortable. Africans got comfortable. A continent that does not produce anything got comfortable. Currently, international countries across the world are fighting on tariffs. Trump tariff, reciprocal tariff in Canada, Europe, European Union, Asian, everybody is juxtaposing as to how they're going to adjust to whoever's tariff is coming. But one thing you don't see is Africa. Africa is not participating in this conversation because we don't have no tariffs to levy nobody. Because we don't have no products that we're going to sell. Because nobody has offered us or offered Africa the Marshall Plan. No country, America did not offer Africa the Marshall Plans. The Europeans that colonized Africa did not say, well, America did this to us. Let's go ahead and do it to Africa so we could re energize, rejuvenate the African economy, industrialize Africa. So they left Africa for dead. They left Africa poor, and now it's a dumping ground for aid. And so somebody like Trump comes, and that's why I like Trump, because Trump is a cold turkey kind of guy. You're going to wake up. There's no room to be comfortable around Trump. And people that hate Trump are people that are just accustomed to being comfortable, are just people that like things to be done in a certain kind of way. And Trump is unsettling those ways. That's why they hate him. And they're going to blame other things. I'm not here to have the conversations about other things. I'm just here to address aid to Africa. Now, since Trump has been in power, he cold turkey cut aid to Africa. Africa was not ready. What had this useless governments that have been elected for generations, over 60 years, what are they going to do? Are they going to step in, or are they going to turn to Europe, to China to continue depending? As a drug user, as a drug abuser, what are you going to do? Are you going to get help in this case? Are you going to solve the problem yourself? Are you going to come together, band together, and say, how do we take this baton and run this relay ourselves? Or are you going to just look for a different supplier, in this case, China or Europe? And Europe is dealing with her own issues. Europe has to take responsibility of Ukraine because Trump says that "No, we're not gonna take care of Ukraine." So Europe does not have the bandwidth to take care of Ukraine, look to Africa and provide you with assistance. China does not give free money. China is gonna milk you dry to your bones, and China is gonna ship more of her people to come over to Africa. So what do you do now that Trump has cut off your aid? Do you sit there like Democrats and cry and wallow in pity? That's what you guys are doing. We're gonna watch some African people break down the consequences of the aid that has been taken away from Africa and what the Africans are saying, what possible solutions they have.
Impact that we have seen right now across the continent and what you've been looking at.
Hi, Jen. So the impact is going to be felt across different sectors. You have infrastructure, mining, healthcare, particularly the long-standing HIV program. Take South Africa, for example, 17% of their budget for HIV program come from aid. And if that is taken away, then the government has to find a way of plugging that hole. South Africa can be able to absorb this financial shock. They can keep the medication.
South Africa got money. So she's right. South Africa should have already taken control of this situation 10, 15 years ago. It shouldn't be now that South Africa is jumping on this. South Africa should have already been the leader of the AIDS research and manufacturer of medications in Africa for other African countries because they have the resources, they have the structures in place to assist other African countries with this situation. But South Africa was also benefiting from aid. How can the second largest economy in Africa be a beneficiary of aid in this kind of situation? So the rest of Africa cannot even benefit because South Africa The second largest economy is also a dependent. Everybody in Africa is a child, is a dependent, including South Africa. How come for over 60 years, Africans are still not taking over the mantle for HIV? If the Westerners are saying you guys are the ones with the most HIV cases, where's the conference where Africans are saying, okay, we need to take leadership. We need to be at the forefront of this. We need to start looking for cures for ourselves, for our people, to shape this narrative. Now it needed Trump to force Africans to think. And the question is, are they going to think in the direction that we want them to think, to take that leadership, to take that role, that initiative, to own this and make it their own?
Going, but then the staffers are not replaceable. That takes away the expertise, it takes away the institutional memory, and also the understanding of how the healthcare system works. If we zoom in on Kenya,
Talking about the staffers are not there. So there'll be no transfer of knowledge. Imagine that. No, no, let us pause for a minute because this is just getting ridiculous. AIDS, HIV/AIDS did not start last month when Trump got to power. It did not start when Trump won the election. This has been going for over 25, 30 years, and there's been no transfer of power. Imagine that now that those offices are closed, those doctors, those researchers are flying back to wherever country they came. And that's why she's saying that the manpower is not readily available. Can, can you my goodness, this is frustrating to hear. Are we even beginning to see the problem here, or are we just gonna act as if we want to just be victims? Because how could they not have been transfer of, you can still get aid, but at least the transfer of knowledge should have happened 30 years ago, where you were the ones even doing the job. The aid should have come to you and you did the job. But the aid came and the foreigners still did the job. And now the foreigners are going away and the manpower is not even there. How does this make sense? How does anybody listens to this and go, Trump is the bad person here? This is disheartening.
they received $630 million in aid last year. $180 million went into treating HIV and AIDS. And USAID has employed over 40,000 healthcare workers, taking care of 1.2 million people living with HIV. And now the Kenyan government fears that if this aid is taken away, they have to go into the development kitty to tap into that and ensure that they keep bankrolling these healthcare programs. Infrastructure is also likely to be affected. The Lobito corridor, for example, linking the copper and cobalt mines from DRC and Zambia all the way to the port in Angola, so that they can go a long way in revolutionizing the green industry in America, particularly EV. And now there's fears that this project is under threat from funding cuts, as funding for studies, technical services and payment have been frozen. And while Africa is counting the cost from losing aid, there's something to be said about also what America is going to lose. Money and influence go hand in hand. President John Mahama was talking about soft influence. China is doing it through infrastructure. UAE is leading in pledges. Russia is doing paramilitary support in Francophone West Africa. So if the US leaves, there's a vacuum that many other players are very happy to fill.
I don't particularly think that Trump is worried about that. Trump does not care what war you're fighting around you. These are problems that you have to resolve. Africans have to start resolving your problems. Nobody is coming to help you. Nobody's coming for your rescue. You need to start resolving your own problems. You need to start having these painful conversations on how to solve your day to day problems. And you need to dial up and ramp up your ability to become capitalist society. That is where you get the money from. You do not get the money from borrowing and leveraging minerals that are not polished, minerals that are not first tier. Raw materials hold no substantial value. And so capitalism has to be the name of the game going forward. So when you're asking China to help you industrialize as fast as you can. If you're asking Russia for help, you're asking Russia to help you industrialize as fast as you can. If you're bringing America in the picture, you're putting tariffs like America is putting tariffs on everything, or you're asking America to help you industrialize. And if our black people in America were people who had resources themselves, then we would have leveraged with them so that they would be the ones running the show in Africa. But they're neither here nor there because the white man has taken advantage of them so much that they cannot even help Africa. We cannot end this conversation without listening to a woman, a phenomenal woman, who has been decrying aid to Africa for years, but it fell on deaf ears. Nobody was listening to her, Dambisa Moyo, an economist from Zambia, on this aspect of aid to Africa. Dambisa Moyo, this economist that we're going to watch here in a second, has always been against aid because aid does not fulfill that saying, teach a man to fish. Do not give a man fish. Teach him how to fish. It does not do that. It creates dependency. As we have seen, as we're seeing the reaction, the fallback, and the pain that is going to cause across Africa and other parts of the world. But that's because Africans did not take the responsibility to learn how to fish, to make sure that they're not comfortable and dependent on this aid.
Another of your critics, former speechwriter to President George W. Bush, Michael Gerson, who, during the Bush administration, Gerson argues the United States started taking a new approach to aid, and you didn't pay enough attention in your book. In attacking aid, in dead aid, you didn't pay attention. Quote, America's AIDS and malaria programs during the 90s were focused, centrally directed, and results-oriented. Surely Moyo should recognize the difference between aid provided to oppressive kleptocrats and aid given to faith-based organizations distributing AIDS drugs, close quote.
I'm very disappointed because my one piece of advice is don't ever write a review if you haven't read the book. On page 7 of my book, I very clearly outline the 3 types of aid. Humanitarian or emergency aid, which goes in, for example, a tsunami or a flood or an earthquake, which I believe there's a moral imperative for us to act as a global society. The second type of aid I talk about on page 7 is what I call NGO or charitable aid. So this is the relatively small amount of aid where we send money for a scholarship, for example, to support a child in Zambia. I myself sit on charitable board. I'm on the board of Room to Read, which is a San Francisco-based charity, education charity. But it's important for us to understand what those type of interventions can and cannot do. So yes, they can send a girl to school, or in this case, yes, we can send HIV drugs to Africa. But longer term, these are not going to help these economies grow by the levels of or rates of growth that we need them to grow to put a dent in poverty.
So,
and you hear her say that long term. It dates back to the Bush administration. There's been Bush, there's been Obama, there's been Trump, there's been Biden, and now we're back to Trump. That is 8, 16, 20, 24, 24 years. 24 years. And now we're panicking. 24 years, nobody took the responsibility for it. Nobody said, yes, we need to be able to plan for the future. We need to start knowing just the transfer. We may not have the resources, the products. You can still ship us the product, but let's know what to do. We should be the ones on the ground doing the jobs. We cannot have a situation where if America pulls out aid, African governments are facing 2 immediate dilemma where they have to fulfill the monetary part that was stopped by USAID and also fulfill the man labor that has been removed. That is a problem. The money part, they could sell their natural resources for whatever and get money. How do you replace the manpower? 24 plus years. Nobody. And economically, what was the incentive that this was going to create jobs? Because you're not coming to you. Okay, so you're setting at antiretroviral medications in Africa. Are you making these medications in Africa? No. Is Africans insisting that this medication is being made in Africa so you can create jobs for Africans? You can create infrastructures, you can build resources in Africa that would benefit Africans since they are equally the victims. Nobody ever stop to think about this. And so now that Trump has cut this aid, he becomes the boogeyman. Instead of looking at your leadership and saying, but you guys failed us. How did you in 24 years not have a plan of passing over the baton and say, okay, we're going to run this aid program for 20 years. At the end of 20 years, we are going to pick it up from there. How is it now that you're being surprised and most of you are not ready? So when are you ever going to be ready? Let's keep watching Dambisa Moyo break this down.
Now, Gerson goes on, he says, in 2004, 7% of Zambians, your countrymen, who needed AIDS drugs were receiving them, but by September of 2009, that figure should exceed two-thirds, 66%. It's not a minor thing for Moyo to dismiss the achievements of a foreign aid program that helped save her homeland.
I've never dismissed the PEPFAR programs, first of all. So
PEPFAR is President Bush's, well, it's being continued now under President Obama, but it's the AIDS program for Africa.
That's right. But we're skirting over a very, very fundamental point. And this is precisely why I say the aid model is couched in the sense that Africans are not capable of doing it themselves.
All right.
The point is, healthcare, education, infrastructure, and even security are public goods. They are goods that the governments of Africa are supposed to be providing to their people. The reason why Americans go and vote between John McCain and President Obama is because you decide as Americans who you think is best going to be equipped to provide public goods. We are looking for that right also in Africa. And a quip that a friend of mine from Africa said, well, if it's actually going to be a situation where African governments are not providing these goods, why do we bother electing them? Why should we not be electing the PEPFAR program versus the British AIDS program? Because they're the ones who are ultimately providing public goods. The reality is the PEPFAR programs are unsustainable. America's facing a 10% unemployment rate. We're in the middle of a credit.
So, I mean, I hope that you listen to her break this down, because I can't do it any better than she already has, right? You have governments that cannot provide basic public goods, not in any situation. No roads, no electricity, no water. They cannot provide anything. And she's asking a pertinent question. If you keep running to the West to beg, because you're just serial beggars at this point, if you keep running to the West to beg shamelessly, at what point do the people say no? We would rather just vote Westerners to be our leaders because you have failed us. You are not doing what, and I was in a previous video where I was trying to educate Black Americans that when you go to vote, you have expectations. Just like Black Americans who are majoritarily Democrats in America don't have expectations, the Africans in Africa don't have expectations from their government. And that's why their governments run while they don't have any obligations to provide any resources to their people. It looks like a Black thing at this point because the Black Americans are not doing it. The Black Africans are not doing it. It's beginning to look like just something we do. You're not able to hold your leaders to account. You're not able to ask the tough questions. Trump's presidency is the best thing that has happened to the world because it's resetting a lot of long held ideologies and comfort norms that have just stayed. And so she's saying that the African, this is in 2008, because she's talking about McCain and Obama, 2008. Africans, this was the argument that was happening in 2008. I am having this conversation in 2025 when Trump has cut off aid from Africa. In 2008, she was already ahead of the curve, saying that this thing is going to happen in the future. And when it happens, Africans are not going to be ready because it's a bad strategy. In 2008, and people were already making an enemy of her because you can never tell the truth. You could never tell people the truth. And they were saying, be appreciative. We have given AIDS medication to your country of Zambia. You're always reminded where you're from. And she could well be a US citizen, but she will be reminded because she's speaking the truth and pointing out the incompetence, long term inefficiency of the aid program that is not going to work. And they start to tell her, oh, show some support, show some love. Nobody reminds, no white person out here is reminding Elon Musk that he's South African. But they're always quick to remind you, oh, you show some support, be appreciative of what we've done for Zambia. And she's like, oh, please spare me with that. Right? This program is doomed to fail. And in 2025, we are seeing the results. But if people had listened to her, if people had bought her book, and governments had begun to put in place structures and policies that would have started this, at least have this conversation and begin at least just the transfer of power, do you think the effect would be felt today from 2020 to 2008? I don't think so. So let's go ahead and wrap up here.
From the
Crisis.
point of view of Africa, I want to make sure I've got this.
Sure.
You're suggesting that even PEPFAR, even the AIDS program, if permitted to remain in place, would prove insidious.
Precisely the point. Because
Ooh, you're
yes,
pretty tough.
it's a
You wanna
band-aid.
say- okay, go
it's
ahead.
a band-aid solution. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh my God, the fact that 2 million Africans are on HIV drugs is a bad thing. Of course not. That is a good thing. But whose responsibility is it to provide those HIV drugs? And more importantly, are we creating an environment in Africa to make sure that in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, African governments are going to take responsibility for that?
Oh my goodness. I want to hug her. You were in 2008 when you were saying this, Dembisa Moya. I was writing on my Facebook page in 2009 that nobody's listening to you. 2025, Dambisa Moyo, we are here in 2025. And African governments are scrambling because they don't know what to do. They don't know what hit them. In real time, Africans that have Africans are going through what you actually predicted in 2028. Whose responsibility is it to provide these services for their people? Is it USAID? That was also now has been proven that we're funding terrorists that were doing harm to Africa. Whose responsibility is it? When are the Africans going to stand and be counted? When are Africans going to say enough is enough? We cannot just take a backseat for the rest of an entirety. And I'm saying there's no difference between the problems of Black people in America and the problems of Black people in Africa. It is exactly the same thing in two different continents. The problem of not taking a stand. The Blacks in America have run up and gone and cuddle up with the Democrat Party, and there's no solution for their problems over there. So we're looking in 2008. She did not envisage that somebody's going to come, but she was just saying that take over control. You need to take responsibility of your destiny. Thank God for Trump. This is why, personally, I voted for Trump to wake Africans up, to wake Black Americans up, to wake Black consciousness up, because Black consciousness has been dormant for a generation. I don't know who's to blame, but I'm beginning to blame Black people. You need to ask yourself tough questions. No more excuses, no more room for victimhood. It is time. These conversations have been had. It's time for Black people to stand up and be counted. So, no, we're not going to cry here that people are suffering. You've known this 20, 25 years ago, and your government failed you. Hold your government accountable. Don't look to America. Don't look to American taxpayers to solve your problems. Americans have a lot of problems. America has a $35 trillion debt. If that is given to most countries, they're going to crash and burn. America should not be helping nobody with that kind of debt.
We are not Americans. We are not supposed to be taking into the American tax base. The American society does not operate by sitting around and waiting for handouts. Why should we, as Africans?
Exactly. Why should you sit and beg? It's not like you're waiting, you're begging and you get comfortable. My biggest problem is how comfortable Africans are. Africans need to wake up. Trump is here to wake the black consciousness up. And if it does not happen in the next 4 years, black people, you might as well just forget it because it's never going to happen again. Because if you don't take this time to realize that your destiny is in your own hands, your responsibility for your future, the outcome of your society, your community is in your own hands, and you have to push and demand for the specific things that you need from your government, it would be a failed 4 years. If you spend your times like the African Democrats here in America crying, the 4 years will come and pass, and you would not have been able to get anything, any resources that can benefit you. I'll wrap it on that note. If you're liking the Village Boy podcast, if you're liking the conversations that we're having, we are not taking sides. This is a fair minded page where I have an open mind and I have critique of conversations that need to be had. If you are liking the Village Boy page, if you're liking the content that we're putting, do not hesitate to click the like button and do not forget to subscribe and share, especially for the African diaspora. Share this conversation. If you're not part of the African diaspora, but you're liking the conversation, hit the like button. America is figuring stuff for herself. Everybody else has to do that too. It's your host, Trez. Thank you and good luck.